Hello, and welcome to the Second Call Defense podcast. I'm Dean Reek, and I'm joined by Sean Maloney, firearms attorney and co-founder of Second Call Defense. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Dean. It's great to be back again.
Well, Sean, I understand that this is your birthday.
Oh, yes. Thanks for reminding me. I think I'm at the age now, if you didn't mention it, I would probably forget.
Yeah. Well, when you're young, you want to remember your birthday. When you're older, you want to forget it for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's not hard to tell when you try to get out of bed every morning how old you are anymore. I've found that anyhow.
Well, Sean, we're right on the cusp of summer. In fact, as we're recording this, we're like an hour away from summer actually beginning, and people are starting to travel in their cars. I know that you take a lot of trips for hunting and other reasons. I'd like to talk about traveling in your car with guns. So let's talk about that, because there's traveling with your handgun, but then also traveling with long guns. And there are some special rules that apply and just some good tips that I think we could give people. So let's talk about that a little bit. What's your advice if you're going to travel with guns?
You know, it's important to know the laws everywhere you're going. And of course, there's enough websites out there. And I know that you have a publication through Buckeye Firearms Association. That's a great resource, the Firearms Traveler's Guide. And I encourage everybody to get that, because remember, when you go state to state, whether it's reciprocity or traveling with long guns, everybody's law is different. Every state's law is different. And you don't want to get caught in a trap just simply because you weren't aware of the laws. And so luckily, the federal government has provided for in 1986, the Firearm Owner Protection Act. It allowed people safe passage, so to speak, through states that normally won't allow you to have a firearm.
Yeah, so that guide is called, the full name of it is Traveler's Guide to the Firearm Laws of the 50 States. And this is written by Scott Kappas. He's an attorney out of North Kentucky. This is his whole practice. This is all he does. He keeps up with this guide, updates it throughout the year, and then at the beginning of the year issues a new one. And you can buy this at buckeyefirearms.org. We sell it for around $15, free shipping, and it's great for trips. Because, Sean, if you're going to travel, especially if you're going out of state, other states have different laws. And, you know, if you're going to travel into West Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, where it is you're going, those laws are going to be different, right?
Oh, absolutely. They change markedly from state to state.
So, Sean, what about this idea of reciprocity? I know this confuses some people, because if you live in Ohio, and that's where we are, we know what our rules are, but then we go to other states, and this is the same everywhere. Regardless of where you live, Texas, California, Oregon, wherever, you're familiar with your own laws, but then you can go into other states, and there's this idea of reciprocity. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. Reciprocity is that one state recognizes another state's concealed carry permit or even if it's some constitutional carry states. It's important to realize that when you're traveling and you're operating on reciprocity, the laws of the state that you are in control, not your home state of Ohio, for instance, but as soon as we cross the Kentucky line, Kentucky laws apply. Tennessee laws apply all throughout the state. So it's important that we know the laws for each individual state. Some states have duty to immediately inform. Some states, like Ohio, have a duty to inform if you're asked. Other states have really no duty. So it's important to know when you have to inform, when you don't have to inform, who else in the car has to inform, if they're carrying a concealed carry gun at that point in time. And there's a number of different things that you always have to be aware of. It's easy when you get to know what state you're in and you follow the laws as written, but it can be a trap.
And one thing that confuses people is if you look up sometimes online, a state will show you, here's the states we have reciprocity agreements with, but you can also just have a recognized state that they don't have an official reciprocity letter of agreement between the attorneys general, but they still recognize your state. So you might be able to use your license in more states than you think. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's a list that you can find everywhere, but there's also a list or agreements but between states, not written agreements that they're going to recognize your permit. And you have to realize also that there's some states that they have reciprocity with your license, but you have to be a resident of that state. For instance, if you have a Florida concealed carry permit and you're carrying that for reciprocity, if you get into this Colorado, for instance, it's not going to apply to you unless you live in Florida. So there's finite rules and regulations that you have to make sure you're aware of.
Now, there's another guide. We had mentioned the Traveler's Guide to the Firearm Laws of the 50 states, but there's also an online guide called handgunlaw.us. It's just a website. It's not a printed publication, but they do a really nice job of keeping up with the laws that change, and they have information for every single state, reciprocity. They have some long gun information and everything else. Is that a site, Sean, that you use?
Yeah, that is principally the site that I use, and I transferred to just using that site because I realized that, especially in the state of Ohio, the police officers refer to that. If they get somebody with an out-of-state permit and a state license, they jump on handgunlaw.us to see what the reciprocity is and what the rules are. So when I found that out, I basically went with that website because those guys did an amazing job on a weekly basis of making sure it's updated. I mean, we all know how often Ohio laws change pertaining to firearms. That's not any different from any other state. So laws are constantly changing, and it's good to have handgunlaw.us. If you have a smartphone, make sure you have that link. And it's always a good idea. Look at all the states you're going to be traveling through to your final destination and print those out, or at least have a great understanding of what those laws are from state to state. Because again, like I said, you could be setting yourself up for a kind of a hurtful vacation, so to speak, if you get arrested for violating their laws.
Now, Sean, there's a difference between when we're talking about carrying, like your carry gun in your car, and transporting, which we're generally referring to transporting long guns. So, for example, you might go on a hunting trip, you're taking some long guns with you, and the rules can be a little different with that. So, can you explain the difference between traveling with your carry gun and traveling with shotguns or rifles or whatever?
Yes, Dean, that's a great question and a good distinction to be made. If you're carrying with a concealed carry permit, the laws are pretty clear about carrying a firearm in the car. You're covered with a concealed carry permit. But in most states, long guns aren't covered. Some states may have a concealed weapons permit that may allow for long guns. Very few do. But certainly, if you are transporting, I drive on a regular basis from the state of Ohio, and I go elk hunting every year in Colorado. I transport long guns. And those guns have to be locked up in a separate container from the ammunition, and the ammunition has to be kept separate. And if possible, they should be in the trunk. I should have to leave the vehicle to gain access to either the ammunition or the firearms. And then you get minivans, or you have sport vehicles that don't have a trunk. You have to make sure that the firearms, again, are in a locked, separate container all the way back, and the ammunition is kept in a separate container. Now, that can be kept on the outside of a gun case, but it cannot be inside with the guns. Yet, the Firearms Owners Protection Act requires that it be kept outside of the vehicle. You should have to exit the vehicle to get to those firearms, and if not, then it has to be in a locked container with the ammunition kept separately.
Now, does the container have to literally be locked, or can it just be closed? Like, because I have, for example, a container that just zips up. There is really no lock or no ability to lock it.
Yeah, that's when you're speaking the definition of a lock container. It's snap shut, it's zip shut, or something like that. Then of course you can also have lock cases, but they just need to be closed containers.
The idea is just that you can't get to it immediately or quickly, correct?
Correct. You don't want to have immediate access to the firearm. That's why a storage compartment in the armrest isn't good enough. It may be it may fit the definition of a lock container, but you have immediate access to it, so that's not going to work. Again, it has to be outside of the vehicle. Or in the back of the vehicle where you have to stop to gain access to the firearm, and in a closed container, and again with the ammunition kept separately. There was a lot of people that I know that don't realize that the ammunition needs to be kept separately, so they have a container, a gun case, a hard-sided case, and in that case they store all their ammunition. As far as FOPA goes, traveling with that firearm, that's illegal. That does not comply with federal law. The ammunition has to be in a separate container, separate and apart from the firearm.
So now, Sean, what happens if you're taking a long trip and you stop at a hotel, motel, and like I don't like to leave guns in my car because we're going to talk about this in a minute, but guns get stolen out of cars. And what if you're taking your firearms into a hotel? Are you allowed to do that? Are there any special rules? What happens when you stay, outside of your state with firearms that you take out of your car?
Well, that's going to change from state to state. Let's use Massachusetts, for example. Now, I can have safe passage through Massachusetts if I'm heading up to Maine to go bear hunting or to go hunting or travel with a firearm. But I can't stop in Massachusetts because as soon as I stop and have a firearm in that state, I'm violating the law because they require immediate registration of firearms. But in other states, for example, I'm in Tennessee and I'm traveling and I stop to rest. Well, then I can take my firearms in their locked containers into my hotel room and keep them there for safekeeping. There's no problem with that. But again, that's state specific, and you have to make sure that you have something other than just safe passage through that state. And again, handgunlaw.us will highlight those things for you. But that's a good question. And certainly, we don't want to keep our firearms anywhere in a parking lot overnight because they're going to get broken into 9 times out of 10, it seems like.
And the other thing, and this is not really about law, but I've known some people who have stayed at a hotel. They get their guns out. Maybe they're going for some sort of a shooting class or something. They're cleaning their guns, they're loading, and then they might have a negligent discharge in a hotel. Now, it's bad enough if you do that at home, but you could be in a hotel where there are people above you, below you, on every side of you. That's a really bad place to have a negligent discharge. What do you think about just sort of making it a personal rule that if you're taking your guns into your hotel, just don't mess with them. Don't clean them, don't load them, don't do anything.
I agree with you 100%. I've represented several people in the state of Ohio who have had negligent discharges at home into their neighbor's house. That's bad enough. But as second code offense, we also had a member who was a competitive shooter in a hotel room in Colorado Springs and cleaning the guns, putting them back together, loading her concealed carry gun, and there was another discharge into the next hotel room. Luckily, nobody was in the next hotel room, but you can imagine the problems that caused. And she certainly ended up in court, and I had to get a representation in the state of Colorado. But that's a problem, and it's better to follow your rule. If you can carry concealed in that state, by all means take that gun with you, but leave it holstered or do what you normally do with it at home. There's no sense of manipulating a firearm, cleaning it, unloading it, and reloading it. So I would follow your advice because you would be surprised how many people have had negligent discharge. Everything from an AR-15 in Illinois that went out into somebody else's house to dozens of other cases of people that I've represented. And it's hard, Dean, to describe it. In every case, they're done cleaning the gun, they've reloaded the firearm, but in every case, they tell me they're putting them in the gun safe and then it goes off. It's hard to believe how many times they've said that, but 90% of the time, the danger is seemingly over, but they're putting it in the gun safe and they must have their finger on the trigger. I can't explain it, but that's always seems to be the final part of the component. Well, it's put it in the safe and it went off.
And it's easy to forget how thin walls actually are. We like to think that the walls of our home or the walls of a hotel, that they're this solid thing. But if you've ever done any construction or seen inside a wall, especially in your house, there's virtually nothing in there. You've got some drywall on the inside. On the outside, you might have some aluminum siding or something like that. Bullets are going to go straight through that. It doesn't even matter so much what the caliber is. Just an ordinary, 9mm is going to go right through that wall.
Went through in a case in Dayton, Ohio, that one of the most recent cases went through a bedroom wall into the kitchen of the next door neighbors. Luckily, again, nobody was home, but can you imagine having to go to your neighbor's house, knock on the door and tell them that you discharge around into their house? And again, several times that's happened to people.
And that can lead to a lawsuit, right? That'd be potentially a civil lawsuit.
Oh, absolutely, for damages. And then can you imagine if it struck somebody and worst case, they were killed? So in all these cases, again, they were lucky, but you're absolutely right. Many lawsuits can come out of that.
And is that something that second call defense would help with if you had a negligent discharge?
Yes, we've done that many times. Probably I'd say 13 times that I can recall personally. But yes, we've had a negligent discharge. We pay for the damages to the neighbor's home, and if there's any civil lawsuits, we defend you. And if the police decide to charge you criminally for a criminal negligence and a discharge, we also provide representation for that. So we've been involved in all levels of negligent discharges, from the hotel room to the house into the neighbor's house.
So, Sean, I want to talk about a pet peeve of mine because I know people, they really want a good gun. They save up, they go buy a really nice handgun, expensive. They trick it out, special trigger sights, everything else. And then they buy a cheap ass holster or they have a belt that's really floppy. And that just really gets on me because if you have a good gun, you should also get a good, high quality holster and a secure belt that does not move around. Now, I'm assuming that you're carrying it on your belt or in the waistband. There are other ways to carry. But if that's the way you're going to carry, it ought to be solid, right?
Well, absolutely. You shouldn't have to grab your pants and your gun at the same time, pull your pants up to hold them up to be able to draw your firearm. And countless number of times I've seen people carrying, and I've seen them using holsters at the range that don't even cover the trigger guard. And the trigger's exposed, but you need a firm belt and a firm holster that holds that securely. So when you draw that gun purposely, it comes out and it can be reloaded or reholstered purposely. Certainly, trying to fiddle with your holster and hold it down as you're trying to draw isn't good for anybody. And I imagine that sooner or later, if you're drawing your gun enough, you're probably going to end up negligent discharge and probably hitting yourself in the leg.
So we mentioned theft previously. Guns being stolen from cars is something that's happening, according to the police officers I've talked to, a lot more now. Let's just talk about that. Now, first thing, Sean, if you're going to have a firearm in your car and you're going to leave it, which maybe is not a great idea, but if you're going to do that, you should at the very least lock your car, right?
You have to, and I can't tell you as a criminal defense attorney in the past how many people that I've represented, because in subdivisions, for instance, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, they'll go walking neighborhoods and they see a garage door open and they just walk up to the garage. Someone mistakenly left their garage door open and they open the car doors if they're unlocked, and they take anything of value. And 9 times out of 10, that's a firearm. I know some people that live in an apartment complex 2 months ago, actually, because they asked me if they had any liability for reporting it, and I reported the theft of their firearm. But they mistakenly left their car door open, and they just had an individual that walked by, thousands of cars. It was a huge apartment complex, and just pulled on every handle. And when one opened, that was a payday. Went inside, and this person lost a Glock 43X that they had in the glove compartment, and they forgot it was in there. And she forgot to take that out, and certainly forgot to lock the car doors. But that's a great lesson, Dean. And your property is not safe, even in your garage, if the garage door is open. Parking lots, on the street, it doesn't matter. You have to make sure those firearms are secured. I mean, that's your duty, to make sure that you have control of that firearm, because your firearm in the hands of the wrong person is a disaster waiting to happen.
And the other thing that people don't think about a lot is, I know a lot of people like to express their opinions. They'll have an NRA sticker on the car or a Gadsden flag sticker or, come and take it or all this kind of stuff. And what does that say to criminals? It says, hey, there's probably a gun in this car. So my advice would be no stickers on your car whatsoever that refer to firearms. Don't have any visible gun cases and no debris or anything in the car, because you're right. They just walk around. Even in my neighborhood, we have some video footage, security footage, showing people just walking up and down the street trying out car door handles.
Yeah, I always say, the come take it stickers are an invitation to come take my gun in the car. So I agree 100%. And people that like to throw ammunition or shooting hats or something in the back window or boxes, but you have to make sure that I always live by the modem to expect your car to be checked every night to be broken into, because 9 times out of 10, especially if you're in a public parking area, it's going to happen. And there's people, that's what they do for a living at night, is they yank car handles. So be ready for it.
Well, Sean, all this is really good advice. And how do people sign up for Second Call Defense if they're not already a member?
The easiest way to do it is go to www.secondcalldefense.org, go to plans and pricing. If you once you get through of all the information that we provide you, simply go to plans and pricing and fill the online form out. And it's as simple as that. It's probably a 4-minute process. And it's easy to do. And within probably 72 hours, you'll get your information packet and your membership packet. But as soon as you sign up and hit the pay button, you're covered by Second Call Defense.
Well, Sean, thanks for that advice. And we'll see you next time on the Second Call Defense podcast. Be safe.